Hi, everyone. It's been a great day here, really. Thank you. It's exciting when you find out that other people are thinking about the things you think about every day, and not that you're all farmers, because it opens up a wider view of things. So I appreciate that. It's also, John, what you said about cows being able to take things that none of us can eat or very few of us can eat and make them into nutritious food. I think about that every day, too. So it's just fun. And thank you all for thinking about these things on behalf of all the farmers. As John said, I'm Meghan Hauser. I'm a Wyoming County dairy producer, which is, thank you for putting up my slide, in Western New York, not far from John, the first farmer speaker this morning. We're about 15 miles away from him, so we're neighbors. I was excited to show this slide, and then John had that fantastic slide of the moon over his farm. I was like, John, you stole my thunder. But this is a friend of ours that has a hot air balloon, so he goes up out of Letchworth Park pretty much every day, and so he likes to send me his best shots of the farm. And this is a fun one because the different kind of cropping practices we have are pretty scenic. We employ 35 local people on our farm, and they help us care for our 1,200 cows. We're cropping about 2,000 acres within 5 miles of our farm, so we're keeping our cows' feed as local as we can. We're right next to Letchworth State Park. That whole treed area is Letchworth State Park. In fact, part of our farm at one point has now become Letchworth Park, about 90 acres. So we have neighbors nearby that are interested in the farm, but Letchworth Park has over 1 million visitors a year. So we also have to be cognizant of that group as people that are seeing our farm and taking into account what's going on it. Finn specifically asked me to give the origin story of our farm, so I'll give a little bit of that. My great-grandparents started the farm, Scott and Florence Holmes DeGolyer. They were not farmers. He was, in fact, a civil engineer. She was a teacher until she had her first child, because that's how it worked back in 1915. He came to this area, in the Letchworth Park area, and fell in love with it and decided he wanted to be a dairy farmer without talking to her, because I think that's also how it worked back then. So he took her from Albany, New York, which at that point, a very civilized home. They had a brand new baby. She had a nursemaid to take care of this child, to what my great Uncle Cal, their youngest child, talked about as being like on the frontier. So they had a dirt road. They could not pass it in the spring. So she was really stuck on the farm all spring. The neighbors had pigs that would get loose all the time and go through her vegetable garden and take care of them all. The house, the farm that they bought was in pretty tough shape. It had been, someone had died and then someone bought it and kind of run it a little bit into the ground. So Cal again described, you'd go in the house and there's rat holes all over the floor where they had to take tin cans and pound them into the ground so the rats couldn't get in the house. So great idea on his part to buy the farm, but I give her like the most credit because she said, okay, sure, we'll give this a try. And so 4 generations later, here I am. So good job on their part doing that. The farm today is really the culmination of the efforts of generations of Table Rock team members, not only my family, but the people that are working on the farm, whose choices form the core ethics of what we do to care for our cows and how we farm the land in a way that we feel is the right way to do it. I'm going to go to the second slide, which I forgot to, which is just a little picture of the very first farm. So you can see that house and you can imagine the rat holes in that floor, right? It doesn't look like it's in the greatest shape. That's my great uncle Willard. He was their first child, and that were the very first cans of milk produced on the farm. So I was asked to talk about our system, and am I talking loud enough to this mic? I know, okay, very good. Which is a separated manure system and a cover and flare system. So this is just a little picture of part of the farm, so you can see what it looks like. Our milking parlor is kind of the center barn. The barn that's going up a little bit in the back is one of our housing barns. And on the far left of that slide is our separation system. And just behind it is the cover system on our manure storage. And you can see someone talked about how the bugs work much harder in the summer. That picture was taken last week. So you can see the cover is super inflated. I'll show a picture later what it looks like the rest of the year, which is pretty flat. But I thought it was important to show that picture of what things look like. And I think it's also important to touch on, like Chris's digester or Peter, your talk about the additive, it's important to have lots of strategies. And we've talked about that a lot already today. to work with different things. And I'll talk about a few of those other strategies in addition to the cover and flare system we have on our farm. First of all, we work with Cornell's SPEAR program. So we look at the nutrient balance on our farm, what we're bringing into the farm, say feed or other nutrients, bedding perhaps, and what we take off the farm, so the milk, the cattle, the manure that we sell, and whether those things are in balance. So we're fortunate to do that with Cornell every year, do that study for about the past 17 years. And it really helps us see progress on the farm, see where we're headed. We're also part of a Cornell study that analyzes our carbon footprint and our diversity on the farm. Again, it's great to have those tools to look at and those kind of researchers to work with. I'm thinking that it was Pete that emphasized the need for research and understanding how things actually work, and we're glad to have Cornell as a partner in doing that. I'm going to go back to the first picture because I want to talk a little bit about our cropping systems as well. I think that figures into things too. So the really picturesque kind of lines on there, that's contour cropping. So it's helping stop erosion. You can't really see, but we are right on the banks of the Genesee River. So if you looked at this picture by satellite, you'd see like it looks like we're all falling into the river. It's all going downhill. So you need that contour cropping to stop erosion. We're also practicing some green planting. So that means we put a cover crop on all our acres we have for about 20 years or more. And green planting is experimenting with keeping that cover crop instead of killing it and planting directly into that. So you have a continuous crop all the time on the ground so that there's much less chance for erosion. So that field in the back that's yellow behind the main farm, that was a planted triticale field. We harvested it and then planted the next year's hay, or the next year's hay crop into it. So the triticale is keeping the soil in place while the hay crop starts to grow. So lots of other techniques like that for cropping that are just really important in this whole picture of things. What else do I want to say about that picture? We're also following a comprehensive nutrient plan. I know that Chris talked about that earlier. That's put together by our crop advisor and informed by, again, Cornell University on the standards that we use for that. We're attending meetings, not only me, but my crop team, my dairy team attend meetings on these topics. So everyone has a level of education that I think is important, from milkers up to the owners of the farm. So we're following all these practices to have the healthiest cows, to feed our cows successfully, to help our cows make the two main products, which of course are milk, and then manure being the other main products of all of our cows. And also wanting to use the fertilizer and the manure as the best possible way as fertilizer for our land. Okay, I'm going to move ahead in the slides to show a picture of our cover. This is when the cover was put on our manure storage. The existing manure storage had been there for about 20 years. And as I think that Chris addressed, it's important to have that storage so you can apply nutrients at the time you need them. The ground does not need nutrients every day of the year. It needs them when the crops are starting to grow or in preparation for the crops being planted. So manure storages are important. But this process of putting a cover on was pretty amazing. This crew came with about 20 guys and laid out this giant plastic sheet, which is a heavy piece of plastic, and then had all kinds of contrived ways to pull it. You can see next to the barn edge, there's a kind of crane structure. Everything they could figure out to pull this giant piece of plastic across an existing manure storage. It was something to see. Why did we look at this system? Well, the initial interest we had was in bedding. We had bedded our cows with sawdust for many, many years. Sawdust is not the easiest product to use for cow comfort. It's unpredictable. So certain times of year, they're pulling logs through mud. So you get dirty sawdust. It's expensive. It's bringing nutrients onto your farm. If we're looking at that nutrient balance, I don't want to bring more nutrients on my farm. I want to be able to balance out what I'm making. So the idea of using solids, which is one of the products of separation of manure, was really exciting. And actually, I brought some with me today. I can say that TSA does not seem to care if you carry manure solids on the plane. They carried it. You can try, yes. So they seem.
I just say don't bring that to Scotland. As a friend of mine showing it in last week, went back to Scotland and they took the wheelbarrow and the buckets off because they were not clean. So.
Okay, well, I'm not going to Scotland. I'm just going back to New York. But I'll pass it around. And yeah, I was surprised. I checked other things, but not this. So you can keep that in mind next time you're traveling. You'll see there's little white flecks in there. That is what we add to the manure solids to kill the bacteria. It's quicklime. We add that at about a 4% rate, so I'll pass it around. It will smell like manure, so you're welcome to open it. You're going to know what you're getting. Okay, so that was our first interest, right? How could we create separated solids instead of bringing in a purchased bedding product on our farm? So we looked at a series of digester projects, much like Chris's. We looked at one where we would be a sole owner. We looked at one where we'd be a sole supplier. We looked at one where we would work cooperatively with 3 or 4 farm neighbors. They're all super expensive and did not really work on our farm for that reason, but also because you have to have that expert person to run it. And you can't always identify that expert person within your personnel that says, yes, that's what I'd like to do, is run a digester every day. So we didn't have that person either. And as we continued researching, one of the key things, one of the other reasons we wanted separated solids was really that we liked that idea of that cover system. We liked the idea of the cover and flare to capture the methane. And if you're going to use the cover and flare system, you have to be able to separate your solids. So when New York State came out with their Climate Solutions grant, that seemed to be the perfect piece that put everything else in place for us. They covered 70% of the cost of that cover, and that made it all workable for us. Okay, I think that I want to see if I want to go to my next slides or not. I don't usually use slides because I'm usually talking on the farm, so I can bring you to these things. It's a little different for me to be in front of an audience like this. Okay, so next, the benefits of having this system. We talked about the bedding material, first of all. If you want to touch it while it's going around, it's super soft and fluffy. What is it? It's really, the cow has eaten food, then she poops it out. And this is the soft, fluffy stuff left from those fibers she ate. It is super comfortable for the cows to lie down on. When we first started using it, we have neighbors that also purchase it from us. They said that they couldn't get their cows to get up. They thought their cows were sick because they were so comfortable. They didn't want to get up and go to the parlor. That is one of the things that makes dairy farmers feel really good when their cows are laying down and relaxing. Like, this is what I want to see in my barn. So that was a really fun part of the having the solids available. Another neat part was my herd team was super concerned about the bacteria in this bedding. Are our cows going to be less healthy? They talked about having to have a much larger hospital group for our barn. And actually the opposite happened. We have much healthier cows, much smaller hospital group. And again, they're much more comfortable. So I think I'm going to go to that picture next. Here are the solids being produced. So what you see in that jar, that's what they are coming off the line. So this is about 40% dry matter, taking a lot of the liquid out of it. It's a slurry. I'm trying to think who talked about that before. It was a slurry, so now we just have the solids coming out. And one of the neat things one of my farm team members figured out was a way to add that quicklime. There's not perfect ways to do it right now, but he has an auger system going. So the quicklime is being added right at that point, so you know you're getting a solid 4% of lime in your bedding. So it's a reliable, predictable product. The other neat thing, so we're not buying that sawdust anymore. We're also not having to have 3 semis a week drive on the roads to bring the sawdust to us from the sawmill plant. By separating out the fiber too, we're reducing that food that's available for those bugs to be making more methane. So a few more pictures of solids for you. This is what they look like coming off that conveyor belt. We put them in these 3 bays because it takes about 16 hours. We want the quicklime to work so the bedding can, the bugs in the bedding are dead. This is the solids going to the cow group. And here are all those comfortable cows. I could look at pictures like this all day long. Okay, another neat part of the cover is it keeps fresh water clean. So here's the cover with rainwater on it. Our hayfield in the back that you saw that we had planned in the triticale, and that's how it looks now. And we pump that fresh water off. So that's about 34 inches of fresh water every year we're not putting into our manure storage. for practical terms for farmers, we like that for a lot of reasons. We like fresh water. We also not like not having to haul that water with our manure out to the fields to fertilize them. So that's a super exciting thing for us to have that fresh water staying fresh. The figure that we figured out when we were applying for the grant was about 3.5 million gallons of water not going in the storage every year. Let's see if I think there's another picture to show there. That's the cover right now. So you see the cover. Oops, wrong way. Not used to using a clicker. There we go. Okay, so that's what the cover looks like 9 months of the year because there's just not a lot of methane production. And that's what it looks like pretty much end of July through October. Income generation. So I mentioned there are 2 other farms that are using the solids. So we are pleased to have a way to help fund some of the costs by doing that as well. Okay, I think, Finn, you also asked me about difficulties. I did forget to mention odor generation. This does reduce odor from the storage, and our neighbors have mentioned that to us too, so that's a nice side effect as well. And I think I wanted to show a picture of the flare. So that's the flare in the front. So you're not making any energy with it. We are simply flaring it. It's about 2 to 3 months a year where we're actually flaring methane off. Otherwise, we're just capturing it and waiting for there to be enough pressure for the flare to run. Okay, so challenges. Oh, okay. We'll go back to this nice, whoops. Okay, we'll go back to that picture for a minute. So challenges. It's important, again, to have multiple strategies for dealing with methane mitigation because not all farms are the same. And I'm so glad to hear that echoed throughout this day because we have experts come to the farm and sometimes they say, everyone should use a cover and flare, or everyone should use a digester. And this is just not practical for dairy farms on the ground. So I'm glad to hear that message really resonating here. That's perfect. Challenges. So key person, and that's why I show this picture. This is the inside of our separation unit. Everything in this building deals with manure. You know what color manure is, right? Brown. Can you see the walls of this building? It's completely white. The person that does this, it's his baby. This building would not look this way if he was not keeping it meticulously clean and making sure it's doing the right thing every day. It's part of his rounds. He walks around that entire storage structure where we have the cover and make sure that there are not leaks going on. He's in this building, making sure everything's working the right way. You need to have someone that makes it their baby. I think that's super important. Second of all, funding. So we talked a little bit about that grant from New York State. That was key for us. This is a $1.2 million cost between building this structure. And Finn, you pointed out there's some study papers that talk a little bit more in depth about the structure and the process that was put together by ProDairy in New York State. So if anyone wants them, thank you, Finn. They're up there. But that's a hard proposition for a lot of dairy farms to invest that much in that kind of structure. So having funding available is important and really valuable. Maintenance. I talked about Richard going around checking the cover every day, keeping this facility working. You have to change the screens on your separators 2 or 3 times a year. Someone has to be up on doing that. And it's an expensive proposition too. Every screen that we change, and there are 3 units there now, is about $30,000 a screen. So it's not, the maintenance costs are not insubstantial. And if you want it to work properly, you have to keep up with it. The cover itself has a 10-year life, basically. So that's important to keep in mind too when someone's looking at making the investment in the structure. Carbon credits, that hasn't been talked about really today. That was not something we were able to achieve with this project. The flare was put up did not have any automatic way of capturing credits. So for a while I was recording them by hand every day and that wasn't sustainable. And because a lot of rural areas do not have fantastic internet, when we did install an automatic system, that really didn't work either. So I think that's still a key area that needs further work. And as an aside on that, as a crop farmer as well, because we're growing all that food for our cows, that system of carbon credit is not really working either. The practices that they like to reward, say, cover cropping, we've been doing, as I said, for over 20 years. So really the message you get from the carbon credits for crops is if you stop the processes you're doing for a few years and then restart them, we'll reward you. But if you're continuing them, well, there's not a reward for you. So it's just something that's good to keep in mind as you're talking to farmers and policymakers. Who's helping us with this? You've heard me mention Cornell Cooperative Extension a few times. It's a fantastic organization in New York, and extensions across the United States are so valuable and important for helping us make decisions like this. There are others as well. New York Soil and Water helped us put together the grant so we could apply for that cover. That was really important too. And I'm gonna go to my last picture because it's a fun one to look at. So we have that cover ballooning up, but we also have these balloons all landing in our fields this May. And that's, again, that connection with Letchworth State Park, because everyone likes to come out of that valley you saw and go over the farms and land in our fields. What else should I say? So the great thing about tasking dairy farmers with issues like this is that, like methane mitigation or other environmental issues, is we're dealing with the impossible every day. I like to say, like, what do I come up with that's impossible before breakfast every day? So if you have a calf that's being born backwards, or the milking unit that isn't working, or the frozen water, or the power being off again, you're dealing with those things every day. So challenges like methane mitigation are good ones for us to work on. We are also by nature a group of optimists. If really we're saying every spring we're putting all these seeds in the ground and hoping then praying that the rain and the sun's going to come and make them grow, we better be optimists that we're going to have that crop to feed our cows in the fall. And then we know how to collaborate with our farming neighbors. That's one of the beauties to me of dairy farming, is we really can work together on things. So issues like, again, methane mitigation, we are willing to work with each other on things like that. So yeah, that's all. Any questions? Yes.
I mean, there's so few people. I'll just. Sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry. I don't know if this is on, but okay. Thank you so much. It was really energizing listening to you speak. This is a little technical, but how did you become connected to? How did you become connected to the funding opportunity provided by the state? And were you provided assistance? And like, what I kind of keep hearing is that like, there's just such a huge gap from like the dollars coming through the government to states, and then farmers actually having the capacity to apply for those funds for a variety of reasons. So just curious your personal story on that.
Sure. So the question is about funding. Our local New York State Soil and Water helped us with that grant, and they were more than willing to help write parts of it, come out to the farm. And every county has one of those offices, I believe, that has farms. So very willing to help us with that. And we find the same thing with USDA, very willing to come help write those kinds of projects that'll help the funding come to farmers. All I had to do was say, would you help us with this? And they did.
Like your local NRCS or?
NRCS, and then a Soil and Water, New York State office, as well as the federal office. Both of them were very willing to help with projects.
Wow.
All the time.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that what I've heard from other farmers is just very regional. So it sounds like New York State is on it, which is great. But I think in other states that it's really hard. It's hit and miss how many people you have that are willing to help you. Now that I've got the mic, I'm going to take the opportunity to thank you. And also just a couple of things I've heard you say. I was just like thinking about the broadband, right? The fact that you couldn't measure your reductions and then, tap into the carbon credit market simply because you don't have enough reliable Wi-Fi is kind of mind-blowing still. I know that's rural broadband has been a policy goal for a long time, but we're obviously not quite there yet. The other question I had was about, how the funding makes sense. And it sounds like it was a sort of a stacking of benefits, like there was some government funding, but then you're also selling some of the solids. Like, how long did it take for it to kind of be worth it? Did you look at like a 5-year plan, a 3-year plan? Like, how did you, and was your local farm credit helpful? Like, how do you fund this as a farmer? Because it's a big step to take, a big investment.
So a great question. That's also about funding for this project. The paper that's right there that Kurt put together will have good details. I also do partial budgeting. Again, cooperative extension helps with that. So I could say, can you help me figure out a budget for this? And it takes about 15 years to pay this back with the 70% funding coverage from New York State. And that's looking at all the benefits as a guess. When I put together the budget, it's my best estimates. And soft numbers, I don't like to use. I'm using very hard numbers. So there may be other things in there, but realistically, I want the worst case scenario for the payback.
Yeah.
Does that help?
Very, very helpful, but a little worrying, because I think a lot of farmers would be very risk averse. 15 years is a very long, you have to be a great optimist to jump in on a 15-year return. So.
Do we have questions online at all?
We don't have any questions online. Okay.
Oh, I have one over here.
Thank you, Megan. Earlier on the panel, there was a lot of talk about value chain co-investment in helping to make these options or expand the toolbox and options for farmers. So has that been a reality for you? Has there been value chain cooperation or collaboration to help you with these investments?
So I believe you're asking, has our cooperative said, boy, we'd love to have milk made this way? I would love it if our cooperative did that. I have aimed for that for probably 15 years, always trying to bring up the initiatives we're doing, other things we do on our farm. And a lot of it's for us, but I would, again, love it if our cooperative said they would love to buy that milk. We have a state veterinarian come in every year and look at each one of our animals for animal welfare, give us a report card on that so we can always improve. We've done, you saw the things we do with cropland. We do studies. We have 4 or 5 studies going on with Cornell University and others, American Farmland Trust, trying to get better. But as far as the market for it, not where we are in Western New York. There's always the hope.
I have a question from me, which is pretty technical, I guess, but I am surprised every time I hear Americans talk about the lifetime of the covers being 10 years, because I've heard in European systems, the same materials that are being used are getting 20 to 30-year guarantees from these companies. So is 10 years like the stopping point where you're going to have to install a new material? Or are they being conservative, or because that might change the economics as well, right? If you have this cover for 20 years.
So the questions about how long that cover would last, I'm going to go back to that cover picture when they were putting it on. The companies that are doing this, really, we need more formal companies doing this. This group came out of South Carolina. They were very little supportive in terms of how do you use this? We had a 1-pager on how to use this, and I had to call them for 2 or 3 months to get more details. When they were putting this cover on, some of the guys were walking on it, and that is very scary as a dairy producer to see people walking on the cover, but they seemed very good with it. I would love it if it lasts more than 10 years, but they said, count on 10 years and see what happens from there. There are little leaks that develop as that cover inflates and decreases. It does stress the fabric. So every year we're learning how to patch it better. Again, that was one of the things I was trying to learn from the company. And some of that was by us just figuring it out. And sometimes they finally would get back with answers. It feels, the companies feel a little bit loose in terms of what they're doing with the covers.
Is that environmental fabrics monopoly?
It is, yes, that would be yes.
Thank you. Great presentation. I also have a question to the cover, because I think our biogas digesters that we get built, the bag ones, so they also give us actually 20 years, and we're talking about Kenya here. But then another thing, we have sort of a little tent cover on top of it, which protects the plastic of the biogas digester from direct sun, but it also gives a greenhouse effect to there to help the biodigestion actually. So I see it as a twofold thing. I think it speeds up our biodigester through that effect, but also at the same time protects the actual digestive plastic from direct sun. So that maybe if you use a cheaper material to cover it, I don't know what the waste in the end is maybe something you want to look at. And then the other thing with the flaring and the carbon offset. So I'm not the biogas expert from our group, but our biogas expert, he's always talking about, because he's looking at small scale biogas digesters, and he's talking about wanting to put little temperature sensors on cook stoves from the farmers, because they use it for cooking, right? To see how long they use it for. So I'm wondering if you could actually get some sort of a cheap sensor that is somewhat calibrated to your flare, that then actually would easily provide you with the data that you need to get these carbon offsets.
So that's a great question too, about how to make it easier to get the carbon offsets. I think my understanding, and it's been a few years, was that we had 2 years in order to apply for those. So we've lost our window on that. And Cornell, I think we're not the only ones with this issue, because Cornell has now a group coming out to the farms and looking at how to get these flares working the way they should be. Ours was supposed to also automatically light. It doesn't. So at some risk, we have to light it every time we want to use it. So it's still being learned how to do this the right way. And we will continue to figure it out, which I think has been the theme of today. Yes. Sure.
But no, it's because the biogas, like in Africa, it seems so easy, because then they're just like, it's smallholder, they connect it to the stove. Like, so you need to have enough cows to make it worthwhile, but like 2 exotic cows give 4 to 5 hours of cooking a day, which is already great, because that means less firewood and whatnot, and it's clean energy, but you're burning, it's not some wood. So I'm just wondering, is there a chance you can put is it actually, maybe there are regulations and you can't use that gas directly to put into a gas burner, and like Africa may just not have all these regulations in place. Because I know we're flaring sometimes. He put a line from the biogas into our lab kitchen, and so at least we have Kenyan tea made of the biogas every morning. And then we have some people proactive about using it and actually making their lentils at work and stuff like that, because it needs so long to cook. But we are still flaring, and we're only using 2 of our biogas digesters. There's also we do have storage bags. So we could actually, like, they're very bulky, and you could actually also compress it to put it into something, then use it for cooking somewhere. Because the easiest thing with this gas is to use it for cooking. To convert it to electricity, you need to scrape whatever. Like, it gets quite quickly expensive because it's so corrosive, from what I understand. But if you use it for cooking, which I don't know if it's allowed in America.
Well, I think they're putting, that's part of the RNG, putting it into the. But you have to have a pipeline in your body to do that, right?
You would have to have a pipeline, and I love all these ideas. That's why we need to have this cross-fertilization of things, right? But I think you'd have to clean it a lot as well. I'm not sure about that part. I think you'd have to clean it. But those are all super things to be talking about.
Well, even just with the farmwork, really, like, we must be preparing something.
And corrosive is accurate. I will say that. We've had to take we have set up so some remote work can be done, because this individual that's taken on as his baby would be there 24 hours. So being able to have it at his home, which is about half a mile away from the farm, is helpful for him when the internet is working. But we've had to move all the controls to do that into kind of a clean room away from the digester, because it does eat through the wires really quickly and the VFDs really quickly. And our milking facility with the cooling, there it is. You can see where our milking parlor is, where we have to have the cooling facility, and it eats through the wires. The fumes from it kind of eats through the wires there too. So we've been learning how long equipment will last around it.
Get an online question that was talking about whether you have methane mitigation strategies for concentrations of methane when they're too low to flare, so like those 9 months of the year. And it sort of sounded like you just kind of let things build up and you're not venting to the atmosphere, right? You're just like flaring when you can at the end of that period.
That's correct. Everything stays under the cover until you have enough volume to start to flare again.
Is that common practice?
That's my understanding,
Okay.
yeah.
Megan, you first of all, great presentation, and it's neat to see all the things that you've already put into place, especially knowing that perhaps you're not getting that incredible amount of support just yet, that you guys are really leaning in on so much of this technology. I'm just curious to hear, is there any emerging technology that you've got your eye on that you're like, ooh, that's interesting and I want to watch that develop? Or are there areas where you're like, gosh, I would really love some innovation or just improvement in this type of technology?
So what would I like to see happen? That's a great question.
Not a
too.
wand, but maybe a wish.
Well, it's interesting to hear about what's going on in Ireland. I think that, we eventually see that coming down the pipe. Where I like to fantasize a lot is about animal care and welfare. This is going to be really getting into the weeds for people that aren't feeding cows. But there's some really neat research coming out about lying time for cows, and their best ability to produce milk is when they're comfortable and regurgitating their food and chewing it again. So that really gets me excited.
I'll do it for the mic just because it's better for the mic. But I was very happy last week speaking to dairy farmers who said happy cows give more milk. So it's in our interest as a farmer to have a happy cow. And that made me very happy because I love cows. So.
And so should every dairy farmer that has cows.
Any other questions?
Great, thank you. Let's give a round of applause to Meghan. So.
If anyone wants to take the separated solids home, that's fine. I don't need to bring them back. I have some more.
If anybody has a hamster, it might be enough for the hamster to sleep on.
People use them for their gardens. We have people come pick it up. We just let them use it for free, and they love it for their gardens. So if you have a house plant.
Great, thanks again, Meghan. That concludes our presentation today. I think, the conversations we've had have been so rich and so insightful, and I appreciate everybody both online and here in person being with us today for all the great questions, for all the great conversations, and for all the great insights. I think there's a lot of work to do, but I think the opportunity is great. And I think only through these kind of dialogues and conversations where we all sit down together and we have those discussions, can we find the ways that work moving forward. And that's what we're all about here at EDF. So for those of you here still, I'll ask that please stay, please continue the conversations, but if we could move into the kitchen so that the